We have big news here on Spits and Suds regarding the Dallas Stars. And hello, everybody. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. And when we have big news, we love bringing in our Spits and Suds insiders. He does such an amazing job for starsthoughts.com. He'll have an article out later today. You need to go back and read some of the stuff at starsthoughts.com. It's tremendous. It's the greatness of Robert Tiffin. How are you, buddy?
Doing well, Gavin. Doing well. I've got some coffee. There's Stars news. It's a good day.
No off-season vacationing allowed for Robert Tiffin, for Leah Simakopoulos, for those that cover the Dallas Stars, right? Like, it just seems like it's like every week and a half, some little nugget drops.
Yeah, I think probably late July and August is going to be the real cottage season as usual. But until then, it's kind of all hands on deck.
Okay, so let's start with the big news that just broke. Jamie Benn returning to the Dallas Stars, a 1-year, $1 million contract. But I guess the question is, Robert, is it really a $1 million contract?
Yeah, it's a $1 million base salary, which I'll say is less than I thought he was going to take, especially after Jonathan Toews signed in Winnipeg after being out of the league for 2 years, and Toews still got a $2 million base salary. But Ben took a $1 million base salary, which I guess shouldn't surprise any of us, given kind of the example he's shown over the last few years in Dallas. You know, the whole a little less for a lot more thing. That was kind of the credo in their locker room. And the rest of the bonus structure, he could make up to $4 million on this deal. The other $3 million is in bonuses, with $500,000 per games played. For 20 games played, that's 500. 30 games played, that'd be another 500K. And then 50 and 60 games are two more thresholds. So right off the bat, I think I even saw Sean Shapiro say today, you can basically just take that as part of the contract because it's Jamie Benn. He's going to play 60 games, pretty much guaranteed. And then it's another 500,000 if they win the Western Conference Final. And then another 500,000 if they win the Stanley Cup, which is money I think the Stars would be thrilled to have to pay him
Absolutely.
if they get to that point.
Yeah, I guess the question is, for cap purposes, because every dollar counts, do those bonuses, can they be moved to the following year?
Yeah, the way it works is when you finish the season, whatever cap space you have left over, if you don't, finish, for instance, when they had to go to LTIR and go over the cap with, when they finally that's one of the reasons they waited to put Tyler Seguin on LTIR for a little while last year, if I recall, or maybe it was Miro Haskin, I can't remember. But until you do that and start to exceed the cap, you're accruing cap space. And that cap space at the end of the season that you've kind of banked, you can use that to pay off things like these performance bonuses so that they don't roll over to next year. So it kind of works. It's great for the Stars in both senses because, number one, if they don't have any leftover cap space this year, then those bonuses, that's fine. They don't get hit for those this year. Those bonuses up to $3 million can roll over to next year's cap, which is going up a fair bit. And then if they happen to finish this year with some extra cap space, they can use that to pay off some or even all of these bonuses so that they don't affect next year's cap. So it gives them flexibility. And right now, of course, with the crunch they're in, that flexibility this year is key.
Well, I think the perspective for Stars fans as well is a contract like this is very similar base-wise to a Colin Blackwell, to an Oscar Beck. Sam Steele makes more than Jamie Benn on the surface right now. Mm-hmm. And like you said, those bonuses will click in, and Sean mentioned it as well. However, it's a very good deal for both sides. And I also like that it's just 1 year due to the performance of January on. Let's see what Jamie Benn can do and see, what's left in the tank. He might decide after this upcoming year that, the time is now. I'm going to retire as a Dallas Star, or he might have an outstanding year. And these 1-year deals sometimes can pay dividends for the player as well.
Yeah. And something that was pointed out to me too is that Jamie Benn has, we all know he's made his money, right? He's made over $100 million in his career. And he soon, I believe, I saw this on Twitter, but I haven't verified it yet. But I believe that he's already in the top 20 in career earnings ever in the NHL, something like that. And he's going to be as high as maybe 13th after this year too. So it seems pretty clear that, Ben, yes, he's not, necessarily getting a glamorous contract. This is, even you remember what Corey Perry took in Dallas. It was a similar sort of deal a few years back. And Corey Perry was, had just been bought out by his team and was kind of looking to prove things. Ben has nothing to prove. He's won the only kind of performance-based trophy for the Stars in recent memory, really, if ever. And he's taken a deal that kind of shows I made my money. I'm not here to squeeze every last little bit of juice from the rind. I'm just trying to help the team win.
All right, let's go on to the other news. In fact, it appears as though the Stars have asked permission and are looking at possibly or talking to Glenn Gulletson, and the names that appear to be front runners as of right now are Glenn Gulletson and Neil Graham from the Texas Stars.
Yeah, we'd kind of assumed. I asked Jim Nill when he announced that Pete DeBoer was being fired if Neil Graham was going to be kind of part of that process of interviews and things, and he kind of said, yeah, he's in that process, which is kind of a vague way of, it's the similar sort of vague way he said, yeah, all the assistant coaches, the plan is right now that they're still in the plan, but of course, as we know with Steve Spott, that didn't turn out to be the case in the long run after they kind of had a chance to sit down and talk to people. But yeah, we kind of knew Neil Graham was in the mix, but the confirmation on Gulletson being interviewed, which we understand that's already happened, is pretty noteworthy, I think, and it just kind of confirms some things. And again, I have to give Sean credit for kind of pointing this out during even the Western Conference Final when Gulletson was in town, kind of saying, hey, this is a guy who kind of, you could see him down the road at some point being in Dallas. Again, just the way things ended, there's so much that really wasn't. I wrote about this last night. There's so much during Gulletson's first tenure in Dallas that it's pretty easy to say this wasn't really on him. His first year, he took over the team. They were still in bankruptcy, salary cap floor. Brad Richards had just left in free agency, famously didn't waive his no trade clause, so they couldn't even sell him at the deadline. Brendan Morrow really fought injuries. That's kind of when his career started to kind of take a turn, unfortunately. They just made the Alex Goligoski trade and lost James Neal and Matt Niskanen too. And that's the year that Gulletson took over. So he didn't exactly have a stacked roster to work with. And yet, if you remember way back to that 2011-2012 year, Gulletson Stars were actually in playoff contention right up till the end of the year. And then they fell out. They actually ended the year with more wins than the Kings, who did get that 8th playoff spot. But the Kings had, I think, 15 overtime losses or something, so they ended up beating them in points. But yeah, right up until the end of the season, although, of course, the familiar end for the Stars, they ended up losing the last 5 games of the season in a row. So they ended up falling just short of the playoffs. So, I guess that's not encouraging if you're kind of scarred by the Stars losing the last 7 games of this last season. But that season, and then, of course, the next season for Gulletson in 2013 was the lockout shortened season. Jaromir Jagr was in town, Derek Roy, Ray Whitney, all these kind of veterans were there. And then, of course, some of those veterans, including Brendan Morrow, got sold at the deadline as soon as the Stars were kind of on that 500 bubble. In that kind of weird lockout shortened season. And from there, Tom Gaglardi had bought the team the previous year. Changes were kind of afoot. They were looking to change things. And so Gulletson was kind of a victim of that. Neuendijk also was let go in favor of Jim Nill. So all I would say, and I said this in the piece I wrote last night, just give Gulletson credit for the proper context of when he was here before. He was a rookie coach. And he learned a lot. He even there's a great video he put up on the coach's site a couple years ago that I included in that piece I wrote yesterday, where he kind of talks about, I think the phrases he used is, I think I owe Jamie Benn and Brendan Morrow a bit of an apology note because I tried to chess piece the power play back then. And Gulletson said he's learned a lot since then, especially having coached the power play in Edmonton. So I really believe this isn't the same coach. If he ends up being the Stars selection, of course, we still don't know. There are still some other people out there. But if he ends up being the Stars head coach next year, I think he's going to be a very, very different coach in a lot of positive ways than he was when he was an NHL rookie head coach.
Spent the last 7 years coaching in Edmonton. Prior to that, 2 years as the head coach of the Calgary Flames, assistant coach of the Vancouver Canucks, and prior to that, as Robert just went over, his career with the Texas Stars and the Dallas Stars, and before that, he was in the East Coast League. So definitely has a lot of NHL bench experience. Now we're going basically 14, 15 years behind an NHL bench. So if he does get let go, he does get picked up quick. A couple of things, Robert. I don't know if the Stars necessarily care about this. I think wins solve it, but the question becomes, does Glenn Gulletson pass like the Stars fans' eye test as far as being excited as compared to some of the other candidates for a head coach?
Yeah, and I'll just be frank. Some of the feedback I've heard the last few weeks, even kind of initially when his name started to maybe be out there a little bit, was kind of saying, "Oh, really? That's not exciting. That's not new. That's not fresh. That's a retread. All these things." And this is the last time I'll plug anything Sean's done today. But he wrote about retreads this morning and about whether Gulletson even fits into that category and how we even define that category if it's defined at all. So that's a good piece you should check out. But I will just say this. I completely look, we were all there. We were all watching those games when Gulletson was the head coach. I remember it pretty clearly. And yeah, that was a tough time. The pesky Stars era, that whole thing, that was a tough watch, especially, with the Stars in the midst of a 5-year playoff drought. But again, I think there's more there. The more you dig into it, you can even go back and find some of those old games to watch. And you can see a lot of positive signs there. One other thing I would say that I think probably hasn't been pointed out as much. Jamie Benn played for Glenn Gulletson. So if you are worried about Pete DeBoer's relationship with the team and the people in the dressing room, which clearly Jim Nill was, I think we can deduce that pretty clearly based on the fact that he said it would have been riskier to bring DeBoer back, despite the success the Stars had under him. It would have been riskier to bring DeBoer back, Jim Nill said, than to go with someone else. So if you bring someone like Gulletson in, he coached a very young Jamie Benn, right? They share a lot of memories. And I don't think he would have any problem having respect in that locker room walking in. When you've got the captain on your side, I think that makes a lot of things easy. And it's clear that, Ben, for DeBoer too, it seems pretty clear, at least as far as we could tell and everything he said publicly, it seemed pretty clear. And Pete DeBoer said this too, that Ben was a really good lieutenant and kind of a conduit between him and the entire locker room. So I think with Gulletson, that seems very likely to be the case too, between Ben, who was just re-signed, of course, and Gulletson. So I think that's a little yes, it might not be as exciting, but I think when you look beneath the surface, you can see a lot of reasons and for why it actually might be a little bit more exciting and encouraging than it looks at first blush. And one of those could even be, depending on who Gulletsson's assistants might be next year.
Yeah, and speaking of which, if Neil Graham doesn't get the job, I would think the Stars would make a hard play to put him on the bench.
I mean, that's the spot that kind of opened up for him when Steve Spott left, right? Like they need at least one more assistant coach. So it really is logical, I think. And again, we might have even talked about it on this podcast before. I honestly can't remember. The last few weeks have been pretty crazy, but Glenn Gulletson traveled, as you said, he's had a pretty similar path in a lot of ways to Neil Graham. Started in the ECHL, then coached in the AHL with Texas, and that's where Neil Graham is. Neil Graham's been there 7 years now in Texas. He kind of had a pretty quick move up there all the way back thanks to the Jim Montgomery thing where Derek Laxdal was moved up from Texas to be on the bench in Dallas. That kind of forced a premature promotion for Neil Graham, but he's obviously acquitted himself really well and is pretty highly regarded around the league. There's been some NHL interest in bringing him on some other teams, whether or not that's a head coach job. So I think it's a lot of sense, like you said, for Graham to come on board if Gulletson were the hire. That seems like a very natural sort of partnership just because of all the familiarity that they would have with some of the same things, the organization, and the same path, right? There'd be a lot of understanding between them. And I'll just say personally, I've talked to some people who've interacted with Gulletson a lot, and they only have really positive things to say about him.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah, well, there you go. He's really someone who, if you're looking for kind of a let's cool the temperature and let's kind of help the vibes, as the kids say these days, let's get those good vibes going. He's a good guy for that. So I could see him having a real shot at this job, and I could see Neil Graham it being a real opportunity for him to enter the NHL and kind of learn as an assistant coach rather than having all the pressure of, okay, here's a Western Conference Finals team. You better win right now in your first season.
Yeah, and the other option could be Nazerdine remains behind the bench as well, so therefore it becomes Graham, Nazerdine, and Gulletson. My only thing is does Gulletson have the tenure where we can go to Robert, Jim Nill, and say,
he can go to me too. That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
happy to
absolutely.
talk
You'll
to
make
him,
the
yeah.
decision, absolutely. But being able to bring in his own guys, similar to what Pete DeBoer did with Steve Spott.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'm sure that's part of every head coach, GM, or interview, where there's that tension between, okay, how many of my guys can I bring in? Pete DeBoer obviously was he brought Spot with him, but I don't think that Nazerdine necessarily was a he had coached. He's really more of a John Hines guy if you're going to look at history.
Correct.
John Hines is up there in Minnesota, where, by the way, Minnesota has had a terrible penalty kill for 2 years in a row. So you have to wonder if John Hines has reached back out to his old buddy from New Jersey and Nazerdine and said, hey, if things don't work out in Dallas, we could always use a PK expert up here in Minnesota. But yeah, I think it. If you're Gulletson, that's all part of the negotiation and everything. I'm sure. I don't have a name that sticks out to me as far as, oh, this is Gulletson's guy. I think he just doesn't quite. He's not a veteran to the point as an NHL head coach. Like you said, he had the 2 seasons in Calgary and then the 2 seasons as a head coach in Dallas. But he doesn't really have that right-hand guy next to him. So for all we know, total speculation, but hey, maybe Neil Graham could become that guy. Who's to say, right? So yeah, that's part of the negotiation, but I don't know that he has I'm sure he has opinions about the types of assistants he would want, but I don't know that there's a name that sticks out to me right now as far as, oh, he would want to bring this guy, and that means Nazerdine or Donskov or whoever wouldn't be a candidate. I just don't know the answer to that.
Before we move on to free agency, the Stars also made a signing this week, and it's under the radar, and some people will say, who cares, Gavin? But actually for the organization, it's good. Cole Lind comes back. 1 year, 2-way contract. To me, that's a depth piece with a lot of NHL experience. Up in Seattle, has performed very well wherever he goes in AHL circles. We saw really good Cole Lind in preseason. So to me, it's like those depth pieces aren't necessarily notable now, but they could be in a December or January if injuries hit hard.
Yeah, and he's also, he was a big piece for Texas this year too.
Huge.
He's a great playoff guy. He's been deep in the playoffs with, I think he was with Coachella before he was with Texas, if my memory serves.
You're right. Yep.
And he is not a well-liked player by opponents. He really is. He kind of has that playoff nastiness and that playoff edge that coaches kind of love to have. And like you said, you never know. You need depth. You need bodies. I was told that by someone in the Stars organization earlier this year when asking about some of the AHL guys and what the spots would look like in Dallas the following year. And the answer I got was, hey, look, we need bodies. They're going to need bodies. And I think the salary cap situation, as we look at it right now, makes it even clearer that they're going to need bodies and they're going to need players who aren't making $5 million a year to fit into the space they have left. And Cole Lind, if he has a good camp and impresses a new coach, right? That's another thing. Some of these guys, it can go both ways too, right? Oscar Beck won the spot last year in Pete DeBoer's eyes with some good competition in camp. But who's to say what other players might be this year's Oscar Beck under a new coach, right? We don't know. And Cole Lind, I think, in some ways has as good a chance as anyone to be that player. I don't know that I see him necessarily starting in the NHL this year. But then again, who knows? Well, it depends on who the coach is.
So here comes free agency at the beginning of July. All right, Robert, I have $980,000 for you to spend, sir.
Yeah, and I think 2 forward spots still to fill,
yes.
Right? So
yeah. So I think I bring that up to say that Stars fans that are hoping that Mikael Granlund came back. Terrific trade. I don't think they get to where they are, whether you like them or not, or whether you hated losing that first-round pick, without Cody Ceci and Mikael Granlund. I think they were nice pieces to pick up, and I think Jim Nill has proven that at the trade deadline, whether it's Max Domi, whether it's Evgeny Dodonov, and the 2 I just mentioned, really nice. Tanev, obviously, is one of them. Just nice deadline deals that get them to a higher level. So. But with that to spend and Mikael Granlund coming on the free agency market, it's just too much money to spend, Robert.
I just don't see how that works right now. Like you said, they have under $1 million. They have enough for one player making a little over the league. For instance, they have enough to sign Justin Ritzkovian. He's already signed, but they have enough for Justin Ritzkovian to start the year.
Colin
in the
Blackwell,
NHL right now.
Come on, baby, you can do it.
but even to bring back Colin Blackwell, they need to clear space. So Dumba is a player that I think his name has been pretty clearly at the top of the list in terms of players that they would be okay moving to make space with the what is it 3.75 I think that he's making next year. And yeah, they can do that either by trade, which they're clearly still trying to do, or by buying him out if they have to, which would still clear 2.3 million in extra space. But even if you took all 2.3 million of that and added it to, whatever you'd have left over from the league minimum after Ritzkovian, and even if you tried to sneak Petrovic down through waivers at the start of the year to get another, $775,000 or whatever it is he's making, I think he's making league min. That's still what? That's 303 point something million. And on this market, I mean, look at Toronto and John Tavares. They're desperately trying to bring him back, but Tavares is pretty clearly trying to get the most value that he can. It's his last big contract, right? Again, he's made plenty of money too, but that's a little bit of contrast between him and Ben, right? Tavares handed over the captaincy last year to Austin Matthews, and now he clearly wants to stay in Toronto, but he also knows his value. And if Tavares does go back to Toronto, suddenly Mikael Granlund kind of becomes one of, if not the most desirable centers in the market. Yeah. And with the cap going up and a ton of teams with a ton of cap space, why on earth would Mikael Granlund take $3 million to stay in Dallas for, in his early mid-30s here, when this might well be his last big contract? It's hard for me to see, and I don't think that's selfish at all by Granlund if he chooses to make what he's worth, because he's earned that right, and health is never guaranteed in this league. So I think the expectations for Stars fans can be a little bit skewed by the roster they had last year when adding Rantanen, Granlund, CC, with all the LTIR space they had, and kudos to Jim Nill for finding a way to make it work. But with Heiskanen eventually ending the regular season on LTIR, that's a big cap hit that allowed them to basically have, almost $10 million between him and Lundqvist. Yep. They exceeded the cap by almost $10 million at the end of the season. So the roster they had isn't one you can have under the salary cap usually. So it kind of set these unrealistic expectations for Stars fans of, wait a minute, they're not even bringing back the same roster, they're going to be worse. Well, that was kind of always going to be the case, because they had all these extra players they added at the deadline because of the salary cap kind of jujitsu that Nil did. So just it's good to keep that in mind. This isn't necessarily the Stars getting worse, it's just a reality that was always going to happen given what they were able to do with the deadline last year.
So Dadonov and Granlund and Blackwell are all unrestricted free agents, as are Brendan Smith and Cody Ceci. If you did buy out Dumba, Robert, you essentially, your top six would be Heiskanen, Lindell, Harley, Lyubushkin, Bischel, and then I guess Lundqvist and Petrovic. Yeah. Which, candidly, I really want to see Petrovic stay on the roster, even if he's a Brendan Smith. Yeah. And I like the two-way flexibility, but I just think that, he deserves it after the last two playoff, especially coming in every once in a while. I think that's good. I would like to see Nils Lundqvist in a regular role based on, to me, where he was going prior to the injury. I thought he was having a really solid year.
Yeah, I think he was too. He was on that pair with Esa Lindell, and that was going really well until his shoulder really started to get past that point of no return. Lundqvist's shoulder, I mean. Petrovic, they had to send him through waivers just to go and play down in the Calder Cup playoffs for Texas a few weeks back. And even that, I talked to him after, when I was down there, and he said, yeah, that was a little bit nerve wracking. And as I was talking to him, he was, he's got a couple of his kids running around, and his wife standing nearby. I mean, it was a very stark kind of reminder of, these waiver things, these are big deals especially for players with families and everything. Sure. And so do they really want to risk trying to send him down through waivers like they've done the last couple of years? Do they really think he's going to make it through waivers after training camp this fall? I don't think that's a sure thing. And if you're the Stars, do you really want to risk doing that? I have to think that's at least part of the conversation. And I'm sure Jim Nill has a better idea than any of us do about exactly what the landscape is like and what other teams are looking for or not. But Petrovic is a right-handed defenseman who's a veteran who's shown he can play in big games. And that's that's a desirable quality. I mean, look at your guy Michael Kesselring. He was
Yeah.
clearly a desirable quality for Buffalo in that similar sort of category. So yeah, okay, do they really want to risk it? I think you're right. I think Petrovic probably they would prefer to keep him on the NHL roster.
I like how David Castillo has made me Kesselring ambassador.
Yeah.
Like he thinks I'm wearing a Buffalo Sabres sweater today based on my guy. To
Well, I
me,
don't think they've got it made yet. I assume you've ordered it, but it probably just hasn't arrived yet.
that's true. I did say last night I took the tags off my Utah Mammoth Kesselring sweater. Can I get my money back? So,
Yeah.
but honestly, talking about you, let's touch on that. That's kind of a big trade in the Central Division, where, boy, I mean, we talk about the firepower of different teams, be it Colorado or Edmonton. Man, Utah is stacking up some serious players offensively.
the Pete DeBoer said it last year a couple of times how good the Central Division was, even at the end of last year, and with St. Louis. I think DeBoer said they could have had 500-point teams in that division, and I think it's possible they could have 500-point teams again this year too, just based on teams like Utah, like St. Louis, that you would expect to be even better this year. Like, does Winnipeg really seem like a team that's going to take much of a step back just because they might lose Nick Ehlers? I don't know that I'd say that. I think they're still a really good team there.
Right.
Colorado is Colorado. I don't think anyone expects them not to be really competitive. Dallas, Utah, St. Louis. I mean, their teams. Nashville, are they really going to be content to be at the bottom of the division again? It's going to be as tough as ever. I think the Stars, look, we saw it with Florida, and the Stars were even saying this after last season. We don't need to finish at the top of the division. We don't need to finish at the top of the conference. Just get into the playoffs healthy with some momentum, and then that's when things really matter. And I think more than ever this year, the Stars might have to have that philosophy, especially with the cap situation. If they go into the season with essentially the same defense they had last season when they lost Tanev and then didn't when they lost Tanev, and they hadn't gotten Cody Ceci yet, and you have players like Lyubushkin and Lundqvist kind of as part of the starting lineup there, they might have to start the season like that, just with the cap space they have. There's rumors about Ekblad or Rasmus Anderson and all that stuff, but those rumors seem to serve those players and their agents more than the Stars. So I hesitate to put too much stock in those until we see how the Stars could actually clear space to do that.
I think Rasmus Anderson would be, I don't want to say Tanev-like, but I do want to say Tanev-like in that I stay up late and I watch a lot of Calgary Flames games based on Hockey Night in Canada, and I really love Rasmus Anderson. I think he's a terrific two-way defenseman. So I like that move. The problem is if I'm Calgary, I mean, I want something in return. And that's going to be the big thing. Dallas doesn't necessarily have draft capital to give up. And does Dallas really want to give up one of their younger players for basically a one-year contract? So it's tough right now. And getting back to Utah with the Paterka trade, Clayton Keller, Dylan Gunther, Nick Schmaltz, Logan Krause, Mattia Maselli, Kerfoot. I mean, you go all the way down, and then you have Logan Cooley, who's coming up after this year. And oh, by the way, heading into free agency, they have $15 million in cap space. So they're going to be very, very interesting to see what moves the Mammoth make in the Central Division. So, do you foresee them making the move with Dumba? It seems as though Lyubushkin, as far as a buyout or trade, is kind of quieted down.
I think Dumba. I don't think Dumba starts next season as a Dallas Star. I think the situation is that at the worst case scenario, they'll buy him out before free agency starts if they can't find a trade, just because you need that cap space. And I think he's shown it. Maybe you can say part of it was the system or something like that, but I think it's pretty clear that Dumba isn't in their plans for next season based on what we've seen so far. Again, I could always be wrong. Things can always change. And defensive depth, never a bad thing. But his name has been out there enough to where I think it's pretty clear the Stars are looking to move on from him. With Lyubushkin, the only scenario in which I think they move Lyubushkin is if they're sure they're bringing in a player like say Aaron Ekblad or Rasmus Anderson, I suppose. Then that kind of, they would take that spot, right, of wherever Lundqvist plays, that second or third pairing on the right-hand side. That's a player they need. Right now, if they went in the playoffs, they'd have, let's say, Harley Heiskanen up top, and then you have Lundqvist and Lindell, and then Bichel and Lyubushkin. that I don't think anyone feels like that's a bad blue line, but it also doesn't feel like the blue line, that had Chris Tanev a couple of years ago on it, right? And I think the Stars have been kind of chasing that, trying to find that sort of chemistry. How can we get back? Your old buddy Craig Ludwig was saying this the other day
Mm-hmm.
too, that they need to. Maybe the system can help a little bit if you bring in a new coach. Maybe some of those players look better. Maybe Lyubushkin looks better in a new system. On the other hand, maybe Lyubushkin looks not as good in a new system. You just don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think they're looking to move Lyubushkin. But I think they would be willing to if they're bringing in a player who's a clear upgrade. But I totally agree with you. Rasmus Anderson would cost them assets to bring. He would. A lot of teams would love to get Rasmus
Sure.
Anderson, even though he finished the season. I think he broke his fibula and was playing on a fractured fibula for the rest of the season, like down the stretch. So he didn't look his best. So you have to hope there's a rebound there because he didn't have a great season last year. But yeah, great player. Lyubushkin, solid player. I think they'd be happy to return next year with him. But yeah, they would like to upgrade if they can. I really believe that.
And as we are talking, we have another trade, and it is Central Division related. The Seattle Kraken really want to make the playoffs as they pick up Mason Marchment. Now they have acquired Frederick Gaudreau from the Minnesota Wild. And Gaudreau, 82 games, 37 points. And so he leaves the Minnesota Wild, and the Wild receive a 2025 fourth-round pick. And that frees up some Minnesota cap space, which they needed. Bill Guerin making some moves because Gaudreau over the next 2 years was scheduled to make, or is going to make, $2.1 million per season. So teams are shuffling right now, Robert.
Yep. And I mean, we'll see more of this. There's so much cap space out there with the cap going up. There's so many teams. It's going to be crazy. I've heard, I think we've all been hearing from a lot of different people how crazy the free agency market could be. And man, it's going to be nuts to see how it all shakes out because there are some teams, forget Mitch Marner, who's obviously the big name. There's a lot of other I mean, JJ Peterka, after the trade, he got extended for over 7 million.
Yes.
And this is a player who, he's a good player. He had 20 some goals and 60, 70 points last year. That's not much above what Jamie Benn had last year.
No, you're
and
right.
It's way below what Jason Robertson had after playing the start of the season on an injured foot, recovering from surgery. I mean, it's just, I think we really are going to have to do a lot of recalibrating because the players have so much leverage this season, especially the ones towards the top of the free agency class, that the market's going to get reset in a lot of ways. And with the cap continuing to go up, that's only going to happen more. So we'll have to really, I think, be looking at percentage of the cap that players are making more so than dollars, because $4 million just isn't going to mean the same thing a year or two from now that it did a year or two ago.
And back to that trade for a second, because I know a lot of people think like, Buffalo, God, they got fleeced. I mean, granted, I am on the steering wheel of the Kessel Ring bandwagon, but I also think Josh Doan is a decent player. I love the pedigree with his father, Shane. So I think those two players are solid pickups for Buffalo for a guy who did not want to re-sign and was not going to re-sign with the Buffalo Sabres. So
yeah,
I think they got something for otherwise they probably wouldn't have. If they continued, they might have received less. So
and they got two players, right? They didn't get draft picks or anything like their prospects even.
They got two players that'll fit in their lineup.
Yeah,
I totally agree. All right, before we let you go, Spotlight, because of the limited salary cap, I would think is going to shine brightly on Jason Robertson coming up on a contract.
Mm-hmm.
And the other player, Robert, is Spotlight on Maverick Bourke to fill the void, right?
Yeah, it's a big season for Maverick Bourke. I think after not seeing too much playoff action, I think he probably won't be too sad about seeing, that's just speculation, but I don't think he'll be too sad about seeing a new coach coming in and kind of getting a chance to make a fresh start, a fresh impression. He's had a good season last year, especially the second half. He came on really strong, but I think he'll have, it's a shame he's a right shot. If he were a left shot, I think that second line left wing spot that Mason Marchment leaves empty now. That's a really great spot. So maybe Bourque can practice playing on his off wing a little bit this summer. But yeah, I think Bourque will have almost a guaranteed shot at being an everyday player next season. I think the cap situation just kind of dictates that. And frankly, from what we've seen from Bourke, especially in the second half last year, I have a lot of confidence that he'll be that player. And like you said with Robertson, if the Stars bring him back, I think they would only move him for a really big sort of move. So if Robertson comes back for what's looking like a really good value deal at 7.5 million or whatever it is, I think Robertson will also, there's every chance he has another really good year after a last couple of tougher years, especially with his injury last year, 2 injuries last year. If he comes back healthy, I think we could see the best version of Jason Robertson we've seen in a couple of years. So those 2 players, yeah, I think those are absolutely great ones to key in on next year, because I think, we saw it with Logan Stankoven, and he and Bourke are different sorts of players, but I think you could see a really good season from Maverick Bourke coming up here. So he's definitely someone I would keep an eye on. I think his stock is only going to go up.
Let's talk about how we can promote you, Robert. Starsthoughts.com. What kind of articles are you throwing up there, as well as D Magazine?
Yeah, depending on how coaching stuff shakes out. Again, I expect the Stars coaching stuff should get finalized pretty soon here. But I'm going to be doing some math with free agency coming up. What's more exciting than that, right? I'm going to be doing some math, and you can read about it. But like you said, look, everyone's trying to figure out, wait a minute, with Petrovic, if he goes through waivers or not, and Jamie Benn, his bonuses, how much space do the Stars actually have? Granland, wait, but they could make room for Granland, right? What about Lyubushkin and Dumba? I'm going to have a piece in a little bit here, kind of outlining all these things as clearly as possible, just hopefully as a reference point for the next couple of days. Then it'll be expired after July 1st pretty quickly, I think. But I think it'll just be a helpful resource for people trying to kind of visualize, wait, what exactly can they do and what can't they do? And I've heard they can make space. Can they do it? How can they do that? So yeah, what's more exciting than math? But if that's not exciting, go read the piece I wrote last night about Stars coaches. That's probably a little fresher right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking in my head, if this was an expansion year, if Gary Bettman said, all right, new team coming to Houston, let's say, that'd be one heck of a team in Houston, because everyone's trying to dump cap right now. And they would throw up some big names on the list of, teams that or Houston could choose from, or Atlanta, or choose your city.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow the PWHL at all, their expansion draft they just did,
yes.
Teams can only protect 4 players.
Crazy.
And imagine what an NHL expansion team could look like if, let's just take the Stars, for example, if the Stars could only protect 4 players.
Yeah.
You're Heiskanen and Harley, of course. And then what forwards and Jake, maybe one forward and Jake Otten.
Yeah, that means you lose Harley or Heiskanen. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you're going to lose Hintz or Robertson or Wyatt Johnston or any of the Mikko Rantanen, right? I mean, it's crazy. The Stars really, they have such a good team. And Stars fans, I think when the team doesn't make it all the way, you only kind of see the flaws or, oh, what's wrong with the team. But man, if you really do look at the other rosters around the league, the Stars have so many good players. There's a reason they're the envy of a lot of other teams in the league. Now they have to put it together. It's not just about assembling talent and everything. You need to succeed with it. But the Stars really do have it. Stars fans have it really good right now in a lot of ways, and it's worth kind of remembering that, even with all the craziness of free agency and everything swirling around.
Well, that's why I am rooting for Seattle in the PWHL, because the 4th pick overall, Capel's Hannah Bilka, is now a new member of Seattle.
There you go. Yep.
Because Boston could not protect her. Great. Yep. That's a great reference, Robert.
There you go. Hey, you were on it too. I think you had her on the show.
Twice.
Right? So,
yeah. Twice. She's sick of me.
Yeah, as if anyone ever could be.
Thank you, my friend. But for those that want to know, Allison Simpson of Frisco, still with New York. So there you go. Those are our current 2 PWHL players. But I have a feeling in a couple of years, a couple more will come along. Man, you're a beast. Thank you so much for joining us. Part of me wants you to have a vacation, but part of me really enjoys having you on, because this is such a great off season.
Anytime, Gavin. Always enjoy it.
It's the greatness of Robert Tiffin. Seriously, guys, if you can support him, it's just a wonderful story. As far as being an independent guy saying, hey, I want to give great Stars coverage. That's at starsthoughts.com. And I mean, he covers the team so well. And he also writes for D Magazine. You can follow him, Robert Tiffin, on Twitter/X. So we have a lot to get to in the upcoming days. We got a new coach. We got some more signings. I'm sure there'll be a trade. We'll see. But if it happens with the Dallas Stars, we'll be here for you right here on Spits and Suds. Until our next podcast, have a wonderful day, everyone.